Hey y'all, welcome to Southern Soul Chats. This season, we're diving into powerful stories of faith, real journeys of trust, perseverance, and God's unwavering presence through life's unexpected twists. Today, we're joined by Allsion Nance, a woman whose story reflects the depth of faith in the midst of life's storms. From a career spanning in fine and specialty dining across 2 continents to preparing for missions work in Japan, only to have the plans upended by illness, Allison and her family have walked a road marked by change, challenge, and surrender. Yet through it all, she proclaims the goodness of God. In this conversation, we'll explore what it means when deep cries out to deep, when faith is refined in trials, when God's plan looks different than our own, and how she has seen his faithfulness unfold even in uncertainty. You don't want to miss this today. Hey y'all, welcome to Southern Soul Chats. This is our Stories of Faith season, and I love this season. I've got to be honest. I look forward to this season since we really began, and I'll tell you why. Summer is such a great halfway point of the year. So in January, we're like fresh and ready to roll, and we have all of these ideas of how we're going to be more in the faith, and we're going to stick to soul training, and we're going to read our Bibles. And then if you're on a Bible plan about summer, you're deep in the Old Testament, and it gets less and less and less. And I know this from experience. So we don't want to be distracted in the summer and let Satan pull our kids being home and our schedules being harder. We want to lean in to faith and stories of remembrance, stones of remembrance, where we are strengthened so that we can run our race well. And that's what is so exciting about this season to me, is that we share these stories of people who have amazing walks with God and have seen so many things, ups, downs, highs, lows, everything in between. And so today is no different. I am super excited to have Allsion Nance with us, and her episode title is Holding On to God's Goodness. And she has been holding on to God's goodness through a season.
Yes.
And I am so glad to have you here to share that with us today. So Allison, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to jump into all things Allison.
All right. Well, yeah, my name is Allsion Nance. I'm an author, wife, mama. The Lord has really given me a heart for cross-cultural ministry. So that's been a big part of my life for, I would say, the past, 2 decades. So learning about different cultures, meeting different people, like you said, just having conversations, hearing their stories, has always been really close to my heart. So I'm glad to be here with you today.
Hey, what a great season for you to be in on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So we're going to just jump into your story and talk about life starting like previous to 8 years ago. So before the 8-year mark, what did life for Allison and her family look like?
Yeah, so our daughter was very young at the time. She's going to be 11 soon. So, I was a young mom. My husband and I had been married for, I think, about 7 years at that point. And the Lord just really put a stirring in our heart, I think, to become more involved in our church, and to really seek the Lord's will as for what he would have us do as far as like ministry was concerned. And he just really put a burden on our hearts, like I said, for cross-cultural ministry. And we live in Houston, of course, which is wonderful. We live in Fort Bend County in Richmond, Texas. Fort Bend County, I want to say, I know it was a few years ago, it's still maybe the most diverse county in the United States. So at the time, we were uncertain of if the Lord would have us stay here, or if he would have us move overseas somewhere and do ministry in another country. But we were just really in a season of seeking his will and kind of praying through what that looked like for our family.
Okay, so as you prayed through that, some doors and windows started opening, some thought patterns started creating, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it actually began, we were partnered with a ministry who worked in Pakistan and did church planting there. And we came to know the state of the church in Pakistan very well. This was, I think, around 2015, 2016. And we saw how much growth there was in Pakistan and saw, just that the church is on fire and it's growing, even though there's a lot of persecution there. And then, I remember one evening I was just praying and I really felt the Lord put Japan on my heart, which was interesting because I had never been to Japan. My husband had lived in Asia as a child, but he had never been to Japan either. So I shared that with him and I said, I think we should start praying about what this looks like, if the Lord wants us to do ministry with Japanese people here, if he wants us to move to the country. So we began that process. We eventually, after COVID in 2020, we were delayed. We kind of had our eyes on the field. We felt like the Lord was leading us in that direction. COVID, of course, delayed that. But we did finally get there in 2022. We were in Sapporo in northern Japan, working with an English cafe ministry, and got to interact with a ton of amazing people there. So,
okay, I have questions.
Yes.
I have questions.
Yes.
So here's my question. So you're praying about it, Japan. It's not like you have family there. It's not like you got friends there. It's just like Japan.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys prayed on this. So how did you move through that? So I understand you prayed about it, but where did connections, how did you get from Houston to a coffee house in Japan?
Right. It's a great question. So we really just began asking questions and, the Lord says, ask, seek, knock. So we just began talking to people. We reached out to various mission organizations who worked in the country. We learned more. We learned everything that we could about the country, about the culture, and just tried to steep ourselves as well as like the history of Christianity in Japan, which if you look into it, it's a very brutal history. It's a very intense history with Portuguese missionaries coming over in the 1500s.
Wow.
And a period of intense persecution in the country. And then eventually Japan shuts down to the world, basically, for about 200 years, which is where, you see this really rich cultural kind of incubation of like samurai culture, the tea ceremony, everything that the West considers Japanese was kind of birthed out of that period. However, the country was isolated from the rest of the world. So there were no other influences other than, Japanese influences in the country at the time, which it has good and bad points, but the gospel was really choked out at that point. And ever since then, it's been very difficult for it to take root just because of all the spiritual opposition that there is in the country.
Right. So were you able to just here in Houston the world of the internet, right?
Right.
Were you just able to look for different organizations that could help you get an in there?
We were. And so we partnered with a missions organization who is our sending organization, Links International. They didn't have any workers in Japan at the time, but they had a ton of resources that kind of helped walk us through what missions life looked like. We also went on a short-term missions trip with OMF International for 2 weeks, which is also where we met the friends who we would eventually go and work in the English cafe with. That was their ministry there in Japan. So we worked with several different missions organizations from 2017 all the way up, through our departure in 2022 to just kind of see exactly where the Lord would place us.
And like you said, you were supposed to leave right around the time COVID happened, right?
We were, fundraising, working on visas, everything like that. Our target date, I want to say, was January of 2020. And we were a little bit short on fundraising. So we thought, okay, maybe, in the summer we'll be able to go. And then everything shut down. Yeah. So everything shut down. And so
how did that make you feel? Because here you've been working with, these different amazing organizations.
Right.
You're looking at making a life shift. So there was things here you have to get in order to do that.
Yeah.
And then fundraising is like a little bit of a stall, but that's okay because you have time.
Right.
But then the world shuts down.
Right. The world shuts down. Yeah, it took us, by surprise, like it took everybody by surprise. It definitely was something that we had to cry out to God for. And we're like, where are you taking us? Like, why are you leading us this way? And really, I think that's a question that's good to ask, like very often, just
Amen.
in everyday life. Like, why are you leading me this way, Lord? But, especially then it was kind of helpful because there were a lot of people in the same boat. So it wasn't like it was just us.
Right.
So we were kind of able to see, like maybe the Lord is moving, maybe he's, creating opportunities for growth to happen. But at the same time, it was very frustrating. We had sold our house. We had sold a lot of our belongings. We were living kind of back and forth with our parents. We were just waiting.
Yeah.
And so, kind of being in this posture of total dependability on the Lord.
I like that.
My husband was laid off due to COVID. So he lost kind of our only source of income as we were, preparing to leave. But even in that season, the Lord provided for us financially. He provided for us spiritually, emotionally, everything. So even in that waiting, that 2-year period of waiting, we were kind of in limbo from 2020 to 2022, just even waiting to get to Japan. But just walking through his provision and just seeing that, looking back now, it's even more amazing than it was when we were in it. So
you have a background in food and is it hospitality?
Yeah. So my professional history is kind of in fine dining and event management. That's what I started in right when I graduated college. And I've always had a passion for food and just creating, fun, hospitable atmospheres for people to come hang out so that I can hear their stories.
So yeah. Was it happenstance that you landed in a cafe, or were they pursuing something that matched your past?
So our friends in Japan, they are an older couple. They have both been in Japan for, I want to say, close to 45, 50 years now. So they are like veteran seasoned missionaries. They actually retired this year too. So, and they're staying in Japan, because they can't, like the Lord just has them there.
Yeah.
But back when we first knew them, they were just beginning to learn about this opportunity with a cafe that was opening before them. And they kind of mentioned it to us. And that's another really neat thing about the COVID delay was that they decided to take over that cafe like right before COVID came, which, they're also there in Japan saying, why is this happening, Lord? Like, we really feel led that you want us to open this cafe and now we're closing it down. But we were able to talk to them in that time, like in those 2 years, and say, like, is this what the Lord would have us do? And the answer, I think, for the 4 of us, was yes. Mm-hmm. And our organization, Links International, they said, yeah, go for it. As soon as the border opens, which with that history of Japan, closed borders, just being very cautious, they were one of the last countries to open up, for people who had applied for visas and especially for tourism. Like they've only been open for 3 years. I think it'll be 3 years this fall since COVID. So there was a period of years, even during COVID, where no one could go to Japan. So,
right. Mm-hmm. They're like, stay out.
Yeah. They're like, this is an island. Yeah. So
don't come in.
Yeah.
Okay. So you finally get the green light, like everything opened back up. Mm-hmm. They were the last ones, and now you can go. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a house, we're just wait. So you go and you get there. And what are your first thoughts?
I think it's just like, we're actually here. Like, even just being there was just kind of shocking, I think, in the first place, because we'd waited for so long. But when we were there, I think one of the things that first set in was, the spiritual oppression was real. Like, I know we talk about it here and we talk about spiritual warfare, and I think we see it in certain ways, in our culture here in America. I think it manifests differently than it does in other places.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing, that we sensed for sure. But, we had our friends there, we had our missions organization, and then we also got connected to an amazing church there in Sapporo called Solid Rock Church. The pastors are a young family who were sent from their home church in Tokyo. It's a Japanese couple, and they're doing great things in Sapporo. And now that things are opening up, they're beginning to have meetings, like where people can actually gather together. It's a younger, really vibrant church full of kids. So they're doing great work in Sapporo.
So what did a day look like for you?
A day, kind of once we got into the groove, there was about 3 or 4 weeks where we were, finding housing, it's a little bit different, than just going to an apartment complex and renting something here in America.
Walking in and handing your lease form.
Handing the keys. Yeah, because over there, they don't have to lease to foreigners if they don't want to.
Right.
So it's very different than it is here. But we had a great Japanese real estate agent who had worked with, expats and foreigners before. So it took about a month for us to find an apartment. We got settled in and we kind of got into a routine. So, my day would typically look like, waking up, doing a little bit of homeschool with our daughter. Then, either we would switch off, either Zach, my husband, would go to the cafe, kind of start things up, either teach like an English course or do some work in the cafe. And we'd trade off days doing that. And then I want to say on the weekends, we would all go together, like as a family. And the cafe was situated right next to a college. And so we'd have a lot of college students come in, also a lot of elderly people, who are just a little bit lonely. They want to come and maybe they learned English, at their time in college or for their career or something. And they just kind of want to keep it up or have an activity, some kind of community to do, because there's really not, a community like we have the church here. If you're part of a church, that's your community. If you practice, Buddhism or Shintoism, it's interesting because the country as a group is very centered on those religions, right? And it kind of dictates a lot of the cultural things that happen day to day. But it's not something that you practice together. It's actually really kind of isolating and very individualistic. Like you kind of go to the temple whenever you want to go. So finding community in Japan can be difficult. And so that's why our heart was really with the cafe, so that we could try to create, for us, definitely that gospel-centered community and kind of create an atmosphere where those kind of conversations could happen.
So you're there, you're loving it.
Yes.
Your cup is being filled. You've got these people coming in, and we'd love to be like, it was just the fairy tale of everything we thought, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. How long after did things start shifting for you guys? Because you got sick, correct?
Right. So we had been there for about 5 months. And, there were just little things that I started noticing, with my body. And I'm like, this is different, and it kind of, as a woman, you're like, well, maybe, this is something that'll blow over,
right.
Or maybe this
I'll be fine.
I'll be fine. Maybe this is related to X, Y, Z. But, I think we arrived at the very beginning of April, and then this was in August. And, people that know me, friends that know me, I'm very even keeled. I was an event planner for a long time. So one of the things that my clients always said was like, you're so calm, you're so collected, and all of this, how do you do it? And I was like, I don't know, it's just me. But in August of 2022, I began having intense panic attacks, just out of nowhere for no reason.
No experience with that ever.
And so, I was like, why is this happening? And it literally nothing would trigger it. And so I'm just like, what is going on? And so I was blessed with a Japanese neighbor and then with another friend who, took care of me and kind of took me to the doctors, kind of walked me through the medical system there. And the doctor said, your levels for everything look fine. We don't really know, what's going on. And so, Zach and I waited it out a little bit more. And kind of at the same time as this, we had just been feeling, especially my daughter and I, there were a couple of things going on specifically in our apartment building, not problems with our neighbors, but I feel like as believers, we're given the discernment to see when something spiritual is happening in another person. And there was a neighbor in our apartment complex who would just kind of stop and look at us, and not a really good way, And so
not so friendly, not so Texas friendly. Kind of way.
Yeah, which is interesting because so many, virtually everybody we met in Japanese was very kind, was very warm, would talk to us. It's not like here, where people will say, oh, hi, how are you? And just make small talk. That's not really the thing, but people will at least acknowledge you, or they'll see, maybe there's a word that you can't find, in your vocabulary, and they'll help you out, if you're trying to order something at a restaurant. But we just had interactions specifically at our apartment, my daughter and I, where we were like, that's just a little off. That's a little weird. And so kind of coupled with that, I think, and this is something that the Lord taught me through that, but if we're physically weak, that really creates an entry point for the enemy to attack us.
Absolutely.
So because you don't feel good.
Right.
And then, he starts, just kind of telling you these lies like, well, you're not being effective here, or you're not capable of doing this, or, you'll never make a difference here, And so even though I was being told that wasn't fueling kind of the cycle of like these panic attacks, that were happening with me. So it was just really hard. And at that point, I talked to my husband and I was just like, I don't know, like that I can stay here and get well. I think we need to go back to America to try to figure out what this is, because there were definite like physical symptoms. And at the time, we just didn't know what that was. So in October of 2022, we made the decision to come back very quickly. At that time, we didn't know that it would be like a permanent move, but we knew it was a decision that we had to make. So
after waiting, after the process of praying it through, the alignment of the right people, creating new relationships, you finally get there. We bust through the COVID doors. You're there, you're getting settled, life's happening. Like, what did this feel like to you? Was it like a hard setback? Were you guys just grieving over this, or because you didn't know you were going to come back and stay, was it more like this is just temporary?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because for my husband and I, it was very different. I think for me, I was very in the moment, and, I'm not sure if you've ever experienced a panic attack before. Maybe you've known somebody who has, but along with the panic came really intense depression. And it turns out that when we came back, it was the Lord. Like, he set me up with a doctor who I had never seen before. She was a believer too. And she was like, have you been through stress? And I was like, I'm a missionary in Japan. And I was like, I don't know if you know Jesus or not. And she's like, oh girl, I have this practice because of Jesus, And so I was like, okay, I'm supposed to see you. But with the panic, just your body gets into a loop, and your mind gets into a loop, and you're afraid of having a panic attack. So that kind of breeds anxiety.
And causes a panic attack.
Right. And, then just resulting of that, I think I had like a chemical depression as well. It turns out that I had a severe vitamin D deficiency, which is what that doctor found, which, researching it, you see a lot of people, I think, had that after COVID, because so many of us were staying indoors.
No sun for anybody.
There's no sun for anybody. And so, that was something I was like, this is a vitamin deficiency. Like, is that all? But it actually took a really long time to recover from. So in the midst of that, in the fall of 2022, I was just still kind of in that cycle of panic. And I mean, it was bad. Like, I couldn't make dinner for my family. Like, I was just paralyzed. And I was like, is it going to be like this forever, Lord? Like, what? So he had me in a season of waiting again. So I didn't really get to process the grief of leaving Japan.
Yeah, because you're trying to figure out what's wrong.
I'm like, I can figure out maybe me today, maybe me. And I can make sure that our daughter is alive, and I can make sure that there's something in the fridge for her to eat, Yeah. And so, for me, I didn't really get to process, I think, the grief of, realizing that this is permanent, realizing that we're back here.
So when did you know? We knew, we're not going back.
We knew probably within a month of being back that it was just going to take a while. The doctor had told me that it would take, up to 6 months for me to recover from the vitamin D deficiency. Wow. And really honestly, for me to totally shake, the anxiety and the depression, it was probably in September of 2023.
Oh, wow.
It took a long time. And so it was at that point that I began grieving. My husband, he kind of knew more immediately, but he kind of went into provider mode, and he was like, I have to get a job. I have to take care of the girls, so he just kind of threw himself into work. And he really didn't, get to process or grieve either really until about that same time, in 2023, even into 2024. So it's been a long process of just looking back and seeing, what we went through, and then also reconciling that, like the wonderful thing about God is that he exists out of time, right?
Right.
Like, we're here in time, And we're like, we were only in Japan for 6 months. Like, what could we accomplish, in that time? And something that my mom told me was like, you see it as 6 months, but the Lord can use that time there, like until eternity. Like he can still continue to work in the people that you met there. And there are people that we still talk to, like on social media.
So you still have connection.
Email.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah. And so she was like, you don't know how he's going to use that. So you can't measure success by time.
Especially our time.
Yeah.
I met somebody years back when this whole ministry was coming to pass, and I was a little shocked myself. And she said something to me that will forever just ring, that nothing is lost with God. Mm-hmm. So if it's a minute, a day, an interaction, 6 months, 20 years,
right?
Like God takes it all. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, his time's not our time.
Right.
He takes it. And I have seen a lot of swing back around moments where I went, really?
Yeah.
Like I'd chalk that up as being gone. Where did that come from? And the realization that God was like, it came from it not being right now.
Right.
But we needed to plant the seed because I was going to water it and I'm going to take care of it. And then I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
On my time.
Yeah.
Because he's not on Miranda's time.
Yeah.
I've learned that.
Yeah.
Okay. So many people struggle with faith in seasons of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. Like I would think for you in that season, like you said, the grieving, like the confusion of it, not knowing. Mm-hmm. How did you keep trusting through these setbacks?
It was the only option, and I think I don't know if this is true for other cultures too, but I think especially in Western culture, we want to be able to feel our faith and we want to kind of chase the high of knowing that we're secure, in what we believe. But one thing that the Lord taught me through that season, it was healing, even though it didn't feel like healing at the time. It felt like a ton of depression and anxiety.
Right. Yeah.
But you have to be secure in your faith and the knowledge of that, even when you feel like you can't get out of bed, even when you feel like you're like, is this medication really helping me? Or the enemy puts thoughts in your head of, it would be better for you to end it now, And so you're like, you have to be secure in the knowledge of like, that's a lie. Hey, even if I feel that way, even that's what would feel better right now. I have always clung tightly to the book of Psalms. I'm a musician too. I love music. And so that book has always really resonated with me. And, it's the Hebrew prayer book. And so there are Psalms in there, like where there's deep, dark depression. Hey,
there's a lot of deep, dark, a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of deep, dark everything. So, sometimes all I could do is just read my Bible, know, and I mean, just read the Bible. But at the same time, it feels like you're not doing anything. Maybe sometimes like I wasn't even sure that I believed, like I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I'm like, will I though?
Is this going to happen?
Is this going to happen
today, tomorrow? What?
Yeah. And so, but the Lord was just so kind, and a huge factor, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, but in that season, there was a period of about 9 weeks where I didn't get more than 45 minutes of sleep a night, which, contributed heavily to the depression. Like if we don't get sleep, we're not happy.
Right. No,
we're just not.
No. Ask any mother with a newborn.
Yeah,
if that's your first experience with loss of sleep, it is not fun.
No. And so that was even a comparison I made. I was like, if I had a baby, this would be okay. But like, I don't, like, I'm not, this is happening, for no reason other than vitamin D is important in circadian rhythms. And it was just all thrown out of whack. And so I wasn't sleeping. I didn't sleep for several months.
Wow.
And so,
and all of it just cycles around.
It does. And so especially Psalm 42 for me was very close to me and something that, I kind of based my book off of, but the Lord really was my song in the night. And like, he was the only way. He was the one with me because, my husband would have to sleep, my child would have to sleep. And it was just me and him, And so in those times, literally in the darkest nights, he was the one that was with me.
I love that because it leads me into my next question. So in those moments, as Christians, when we say he's with me, I feel like most Christians understand that statement. Mm-hmm. But then I have met some who are like, what do you mean? Mm-hmm. I've never really heard him talk to me, or I've never experienced that. And then come to be believers one day.
Right.
are like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So how did you feel? Like, are there certain things that stand out to you that you knew, like, this happened, that happened, or through this, like, I knew he was there beyond a shadow of a doubt? Like, how did he meet you in that time?
Well, it was definitely scripture, especially, when it was just me lying awake in the night. But he really made himself known through his body. Before we left for Japan, before Japan was even on our radar, we were part of a church plant, Renaissance Church in historic Richmond. Still going there to this day. They just celebrated their 7th anniversary, I think, and so our 7th birthday. And that was the church that we returned to, and we had the arms of our church body to literally fall into. When I came back, I was a wreck. And so the women in my church, like, they were the ones to really, like, lift me up and say, either, I've been through something similar, or you're going to be okay.
Right.
And so sometimes I think we only value experience if we think, the Lord has to speak to me during my quiet time.
Right.
Or the Lord has to speak to me through scripture. And I think we discount how he can speak to us through his body, through our friends, through
Community.
other believers. Through community.
And what's interesting about that, if you think about it, think about the world after COVID here, like because you were still around, everybody was afraid to be community. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you still didn't go back to church for a little while.
Right.
Couldn't go to school, couldn't go to work, couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
If you did, you better have 8 masks on and look down the whole time.
And stay 6 feet away.
Yeah, stay far away. So, and I really felt like that was a huge tool of the devil, right? That he really, it wasn't just that it was COVID, it was that he shut the world off. He disconnected us from our people, our tribes,
Right.
where we can draw strength like you're talking about.
Right.
So what an amazing, it's amazing that you walked into it and that people didn't go like, oh, well, we're still like COVID from a distance.
Yeah.
That he had prepared a way right there for people to be like, we don't care.
Yeah.
Because community is so important. It's a huge part of our faith. We can read the Bible, like you said. We can pray. We can have this one-dimensional relationship here. But we gain so much more when we come together, like you said, experience what God's taught other people. And it's huge. And I think we just discount it sometimes.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Or we think, maybe this person won't like me, or we think maybe I won't like that person because of X, Y, Z,
Right.
Or because of who they voted for, or I don't know if I can worship with them because, they've said this certain thing or they've done this certain thing, and I don't know if I can trust them. And, that can originate from a plethora of things, just from your own like history of church hurt or family hurt, or just perceptions of who God is. But, I think back to the letters that Paul wrote the churches, and the majority of the time he's like, y'all, you need to like love one another. Like, y'all don't have this down right. Like we really need to work on this. And so I think it's so funny when pastors are like, we need to be like the early church, and, just really feel the movement of the Spirit, which is true, like at Pentecost and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, the church has always had problems with community. Like it always has.
This is not a new thing.
It's not a new thing. Like, and it's something that is really beautiful. There's a beauty in that brokenness. And so one of the things, that I think every successful church has to walk through is how do we continue to hope and to move forward? Even when we're not completely unified on everything, we can still agree that our hope is in Christ. Yeah. And as long as our hope is in Christ and is in who he is, that's success.
And being more like him.
Yeah.
It's not trying to be more like my neighbor.
Right.
And more like the person I don't have things in common with, right? Being more like Christ and that pouring out of me, those fruits.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that Psalms were like really important during that time.
Yes.
Is there a particular one? Like, did you have any scriptures that were like your go-to or more of like your lean in? Like this is where I'm finding my comfort.
Yeah, really all of like Psalm 42, that throughout my life, that's been a big one. And that's kind of where I go back to, because it just paints this really vivid portrait of a person who's suffering. Like, he says, deep cries out to deep, at the sound of your waterfalls, like all of your waves and breakers have washed over me. And he just feels totally like inundated with everything that God's had him go through. But at the same time, the psalmist says, don't despair, hope again in God, for I'm going to praise him again, and so he's the song of the night. So yeah, so that was a big one for me.
I love that. So in the midst of all the change, you guys went out like and had a new adventure. You did start a coffee truck. And so how did that come about, and what did you experience through that?
Yeah, so during our brief time in Japan, the cafe that we were working with roasted their own coffee in-house. And they didn't totally know what they were doing. So they were like, Zach, if you would like to help out with this, like, that would be great. And he was like, okay. And so he really got into just learning the art and the science of coffee roasting. And like, I love to cook, I love to cook, but at the same time, I'm like, I actually don't drink coffee.
I don't either. We might be the only two people.
I know. And this is why we're here. Yeah. But he loves coffee. He was really into it. And so he became really passionate about it. And so when we got back, my husband, Zach, said, I would really love to continue doing something with coffee. And so for his birthday, I think in 2023, I got him just like a little home roaster and everything. And he's really good at roasting coffee. Like, I just admitted I'm not a coffee drinker, and he'll have me try it. And I'm like, that's actually pretty good.
You're like, maybe.
I'm like, maybe sometimes. So he started Victory Point Coffee, and we've just been roasting out of our home. We did have a coffee truck for a little while, and Zach's heart behind Victory Point was really always to have it benefit, the church in some way, and be some kind of ministry, still an extension of ministry. And so, fortunately this spring we were able to gift our espresso machine to another local church in town who's actually going to open up like their own coffee space soon.
Nice.
And we'll, continue to provide coffee for them. And we're still roasting out of our home, and just selling at various farmers markets and things like that, and through our website. But yeah, it's been a really sweet gift to see how the Lord has used, something that was started in Japan to still continue to bless other people. So
Yeah, that's amazing. So I looked up your blog.
yeah,
She doesn't post all the time,
no, it's been a while. Yeah.
but she has some really great blogs. So, and you make mention to, like, since you were a kid, you were talking and writing and
Yes.
being. So what inspired that, even in your childhood, like to want to write and because your writing's really good.
Oh, thank you. I just love reading, in general. A couple of my earliest memories one of them is like my mother very early in the morning, just reading her Bible, or always reading a book, like at dinner or right before bed. And of course she would read to me, like when I was very young. And so I just remember reading with her. And then another early memory that I have is my dad, on his days off, he would take me we lived in Dallas, and there are a ton of free museums in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so he would take me to these museums, and we would go and walk around and look at different paintings and sculpture and things like that. And just looking at art and being exposed to really good art and really good literature, like, it gives you so much inspiration, just as a writer, as somebody who appreciates that. And so I think growing up with parents who kind of really immersed me in the art of writing and reading, and in the arts in general, art, music, everything like that, I just learned to kind of express myself in those ways. Don't ask me to do math. I can't do that, but yeah.
I cannot add 2 plus 2, but I can write a sentence that will make you lose your mind.
Yes.
That's great. So that question leads into the moment, right? You have written a book.
Yes.
And it's going to be coming out really soon.
Yes. Hopefully
tell us,
by the time you're listening, it will be out in the world. So
yes.
as of this moment. Yeah.
So tell us how that came to be in the midst of all this, and what it's about. And you don't have to give all the good stuff away. Don't worry.
Won't. Yeah. I'll give you a little good stuff. So, we talked about Psalm 42. That's where the title for the book comes. The book is Deep Cries Out. And I'll just kind of give you the pitch for it. It is a contemporary fiction novel. It's about a businesswoman who goes to Galveston for healing, and her faith is restored through the help of her family and friends. However, while she's there, she also learns about a secret that might not end her career, but may also end her life. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. So the book really started through one of the wonderful women, at my church when I came back. She said, God is still writing your story.
I love that.
Like, he's not done with you. So you need to keep holding on to him. And I was like, okay, just like sleep deprived, depressed me. I was like, okay,
I can do it.
I can do it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of put, the seed in my mind, like, maybe I should journal this. And then I had a couple other friends being like, you should really keep a journal of this time so that, when you're well, when you're out of this, you can go back and read it, and see everything that God has taken you through. And there's a cynical part of me that's like, I never want to read about this.
I was about to say
again.
to you, like, I would think in that moment you would be like,
I'd be like, this is the last thing I want to do.
Yeah. Want to see, burn it.
Yeah.
Burn it.
Yeah. It's like one of those things you do at the retreats, like you write your transgression on the rock and like throw it. I'm like,
set it on fire.
I could do that. Yeah, set it on fire. But so I didn't really want to do that, but I started writing when kind of toward the tail end of Insomnia. I started writing for the character of Amy, who's the protagonist. She's the main character in Deep Cries Out. And there were a couple of scenes that were really vivid that I feel like the Lord put on my heart for her to do. And there was no plot at the beginning of me writing. I was just like, this is what she feels like right now.
You just have Amy and here she is.
You just have Amy and here she is. She's struggling. She's struggling with depression. She wants to get well. I don't think this will give too much away, but in the story, she's a widowed single mom. And so she's been through some trauma, which I haven't gone through, but it's equal loss, I would think,
Absolutely.
And she's very successful in the world's eyes, but she's really kind of directionless too. And she doesn't know where she's going. She's still there leaning on the Lord. So the beginning stages of me writing was writing when I was still feeling very depressed and very anxious, because I did want to capture that. I wanted to, as a reader, we love stories that take us somewhere else, right? And there are people who love thrillers or people who love romance. There's a little bit of that in Deep Cries Out. There's a little bit of everything for everybody.
But Amy sounds like she's a character that has a lot of emotion that was poured into her.
She does, yeah. And so she goes through a season of depression, and, she comes out of it, with the help of her community and by God's grace. But that's kind of how writing began for that, was really me kind of processing what I was feeling. And then as the months went on, this was in 2023, kind of in the summer, I thought, this could be like a story. This could be fun. We
could do something with Amy.
We could do something, like she could meet, like a wonderful man, and she could run into other obstacles, that, she's only now realizing is like another true problem in her life that she can solve.
Right.
And so from there it just went on, and then 85,000 words later, here we are. So yeah.
And you had a publisher?
I did. Yeah. So I completed the manuscript in 2023. And for fictional, writing for novels, you have to have a manuscript complete before you pitch it to like an agent or a publisher. And there's a process called querying. I think it's the only time we use that word. But I started doing that in 2024 for Deep Cries Out. I queried different agents, literary agents, and different publishers. And I went to a conference in West Virginia in April of 2024. It's called Hope Words. It's wonderful. But my publisher was there, and they were accepting pitches, from all of the writers who were there. And they offered me a contract from that. So I submitted, you usually submit, kind of a synopsis and then like your first 3 chapters. And yeah, the president offered me a contract. He's like, I'd love to publish your book, which was really a blessing to me, because it has, it's from a Christian perspective and from a, a Christian point of view, but there's a lot of things in there that I don't think the Christian publishing industry typically allows in their books.
Right.
There's a lot of, drug
Real
addiction.
real life
things, real life
like
things.
the things that people go through every day.
Real
those
life
kind of
things, yeah.
Okay.
Real
I'm
life,
just making sure.
real life 4-letter words that we sometimes say.
Yeah.
And so, it's very real and it's very raw. But there's hope in it. I feel like one of the things that you do when you query is you read what's selling right now, because that's what a publishing house does. They sell books, they're in it to be successful, to make money. And so I've read so many good books, like in 2023 and 2024, just to see, what a comparable title would be. They would say this book is selling, so therefore my book will also sell because this. And in so many of those books, the writing is beautiful. The characters are beautiful. Like the plot is like masterfully constructed, but then there's like no hope, and you're like, what is the character hoping? And like, they're literally just hoping that tomorrow will be better for tomorrow's sake.
Yeah. No eternal hope.
No eternal hope. And so I think that's the difference with Deep Cries Out too, is because, the Lord is like the basis for all of it. And that's why these characters have hope and why they're able to go through everything that they go through.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's coming out soon. It's probably a bad question to ask, but like, will there be another book?
So
do you have the book bite bug? Did it bite you? That's what I need to know.
I have been bitten. So there's one character in Deep Cries Out who I did start writing another novel based off of their experience in the first novel. So I think each one could be standalone. You could read it without reading the other one. But there is another book in the works that I'm probably going to, start querying soon, or see if my publisher wants to buy it. So yes, there is another book that is almost completed. The manuscript is almost complete for that one.
So, it's always easy to talk about things after they happen, right? I think about that with the Bible a lot. Like in the moment in the Bible, there's so many questions we have about how could y'all not know this and how could you not know? Well, because they were living it. Like they didn't know.
Right.
And some of them, like they never knew.
Yeah.
But it's the same in life. So if you look at your story, right, and you go, Lord, you sent me all the way to Japan to, do the calling, whatever it was, but then you look me back around here. But you can see how being there and the things that led up put these emotions and these feelings so that you could do something that was absolutely completely different than what you thought the original mission is. Like I'm a full-fledged believer now that the original mission is never the mission.
Right.
It just looks like the mission.
Yeah.
But it's really training ground for when you really get to where you're going. And even when you get to where you're going, sometimes there's like these little curves and spawns. And
Well, and that's one thing that already, when the book was not published yet, like I still had beta readers and also endorsers, other authors who, like write the little blurb for your book. That's like, it's amazing,
Go buy this book.
Go buy this book. And so I've, been blessed to, have a relationship with one of these authors who I never thought I'd be able to, but her book has been like a book of the month and like on Amazon bestseller lists and everything like that. And it was really interesting because I reached out to her after reading her debut novel, and I was like, I feel like she's a believer. Like, even though that wasn't expressed, just kind of stated in her book. And so I wrote her and I said, hey, my name's Allison. I've written this book. I'm getting endorsements. I would love it if you read the book, and if you enjoy it, I would deeply appreciate your endorsement. And she wrote me back, and this author wrote me back, and she said, I have never read anything that describes the anxiety and the depression and what you walked through. She's like, I know you must have walked through this because I have also walked through this. And nobody knows what this is like except for somebody who's been through it. And she said, I've never read anything that captures just like, when you read it, like you feel, you feel that feeling in your chest. You're like, oh my gosh, is she going to make it? And so that author's encouragement, and then several other beta readers who have read it, they said, thank you for writing this because people need to know, what this is like and that this is a real problem and that it's possible for God to guide you through it and to lead you out of it and that there is hope at the end of the story. And so it's been, like you said, it's been kind of a crazy journey, like the original mission, our mission is to stay with the Lord, right? Wherever he leads us. And so what we get focused on, like, is this country or this people group or this missional business or, this set of people that I'm supposed to be with. But really it's just growing more, like you said earlier, in the knowledge of him and who he is, so that we can love one another the way that he loves us.
So looking back, because now you're on the other side, like, and I don't mean it in the literal sense of your book, but looking back on your story, like the book of Allison and family, what has God taught you like the most through all this?
Oh gosh, he's still teaching me. So I would just say one thing, is patience, and humility, and I think those two things together, like what I want, is not what he wants. His ways are not my ways. And so I think that is something that he's really had to teach me. But he's also shown me how that's better, how relying on him, when I'm waiting to go to Japan, when I'm waiting, to be healed, from depression, when I'm waiting to hear back from an agent or an editor or a publisher, for the book, is still just to trust him, and to continue to walk with him, even when it feels like everything is falling apart, which, you look at our world right now, like things are falling apart, but we're still able to have hope because, Jesus has overcome the world. So, because I'm sure somebody's out there going to wonder, everything with the depression and the anxiety attacks, all of that, did it just cease like after treatment, or do you still struggle with any of that? It didn't. So it really was, I think my depression specifically, I know that there are many people who are different, who experience chronic depression. That wasn't my case. I think it was more of a chemical depression. I was really hormonally imbalanced at the time. Vitamin D is a hormone, and so it can mess around with your body and your mind in crazy ways.
Right.
And the doctor was right that I saw. She said, this is going to take time. And it took about 6 months. And I have a friend who's a counselor, and, she said our brains get used to anticipating anxiety and entertaining unhealthy thoughts. And she said, there are neural pathways in your brain that you just have thoughts that you get used to thinking and, things that you think are going to happen. And her words were, I'm going to pray for those neural pathways to die. But, another verse that I kind of clung to was, whatever is good, whatever is beautiful, think on these things. And I mean, science backs it up, and
Absolutely.
So by writing the story, by being with, the women in my church and my community, by being with my husband and my child in our new circumstances and focusing on those things and what God was doing in us moving forward instead of dwelling on the past, that definitely also helped me heal. Of course, sleep helps heal too.
When you got to sleep again?
Yeah, when I got to sleep again.
It's amazing what sleep can do.
It does. But, sometimes, and I can kind of identify it now as, a woman of my age who's probably not going to have any more kids and is getting older. I can identify, like maybe tiny depressive episodes. And I'm like, this is what this is. And in a way, it's comforting to know that, because you're like, A, this is normal, and B, I know I can see the other side of it.
Right.
So while I don't struggle with, depression or anxiety at all, as I was in 2022 and 2023, like in any way, there are still moments where I can see that I can choose, am I going to be anxious about this situation, or am I going to kind of fixate on this, or am I going to know what God has already brought me through and then be able to look ahead and see, that I really can trust him because he's brought me through so much. So
I have a question for you as we wrap up. Like I said in the beginning, in the opening, this season is my favorite. We did start this way. We started our first however many episodes of Stories of Faith where we just talked to people and heard their stories just like yours. We had light stories and we had heavy stories and we had everything in between. And I was prompted this morning, I didn't have it on my original notes to ask, but I was prompted this morning to ask you, why do you believe stories of faith are important, maybe even critical for our lives?
I think because God is the greatest storyteller. I mean, he's given us the Bible. He's given us scripture the first thing that the Bible tells us that he did is that he spoke and created light. And so I think, we have Twitter and we have Instagram and we have so much media that we can consume, and all of these things are surrounded by words, right? And I think the power of words really kind of gets lost in all of that. But words and story are just so important because it's how we know who we are. It's how we know our history. And, with the Holy Spirit inside of us, it's how we know our future too. And so that's why it's so important. And even fictional stories, can still point to truth. All truth, belongs to the Lord. And so if we're grounded in truth, and if we even tell fictional stories that are grounded in truth, the Lord can use that, as an opportunity to speak into somebody's life or say, like, you're not alone. And so especially what you're doing here on the podcast is so cool, just hearing people's stories and, just that knowledge that we're not alone, that we're all in this together, and that the things that we're going through, other people have been through too. And it's not as crazy or lonely or terrible, as the world makes it out to be. So,
yeah. Okay. So what encouragement would you give to somebody who feels stuck in a season of waiting or disappointment?
I would just say, keep going. Like, it's going to get better. If they're a believer, it's so hard. We do want to be gentle and like aware of where somebody is, like, walking. I understand this now, but walking up to somebody who's depressed and saying, why can't you just be happy? Like, that is not what you should say. You're like,
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
You're like,
right?
I literally cannot be happy right now.
Right.
Yeah. And so I would say, just offering them hope and, kind of what we just talked about, offering them your story too. And you can say, I've been there. Like, I have been exactly where you are in a very similar situation, and it will get better. And, it's true, especially since we have the hope of Christ. It's true. So,
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Allison, tell everybody how they can connect with you as far as the book. And I know you have the blog, but is there other ways they can connect and see more things, Allison?
Yeah. So I do have the website. It's my name. It's AllisonRNance.com. And then I am pretty active on Instagram, and it's the same handle, Allison R. Nance. I post a lot of fun book things there. If you sign up on my website, I do have a newsletter that I send pretty infrequently so as not to spam people. But there is also a little short story on there that you can download for free when you sign up for the newsletter. And that kind of gives you a taste of my writing style and what I write about. And so, yeah, I love, and there's a contact form on my website. I love hearing from readers and, just, maybe somebody watching this episode, just reach out with an email. I love talking to people. I love hearing stories. I love writing stories.
You heard her. She loves words.
I do. I love words. So come talk to me.
Just don't ask her a math question.
No math. I will stop at that.
Yeah. You're like, that's where the conversation is.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, Allison, thank you so much for sharing your journey, the ups, the downs, a lot of people don't want to share intimate details of their life, right? They're either afraid or embarrassed. But I love how you're eager to share and that you use it to tell stories, to encourage and to point back to who our hope is. Like you said, so many things in this world, TV, radio, social media, it all feels good in the moment, but then there's no substance.
Yeah.
And so I love that this book is just the real world and points us back to where our hope is found. And your heart is so sweet. I wish I could write like you, man. I'm gonna come take some pointers. My words come out all over the place. So that's why this platform is a lot better for me. I don't have to write anything. I just get to open my mouth and it comes out. Okay, so we are going to post all of Allison's resources in our resource area. Now, you guys make sure to check out her book that's going to be coming out this summer. You heard it here first. No, not really. It was on her social media, but you didn't know who she was. So you heard it here first today if you didn't know who she was. So we want you guys to go and check that out. And as always, we so appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend time with us, to hear these stories of faith. We hope you were encouraged. We hope you have a great week. We also have a webpage. We would love to pray for you. We would love to hear from you. You're not going to get as many words from Allison, I'm better with the math question. Okay. Anyway, guys, that's it for us, Allison. We're done.
Thank you.
Have a great week, guys. See you next time. Bye. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode of Southern Soul Chats. Allsion Nance's story is a powerful reminder that even in the hardest seasons, God's faithfulness never wavers. Her journey through unexpected twists and turns is a testament to His goodness and His grace. Be sure to check out her book, Deep Cries Out. You can find it in the link in our episode resources. If this conversation has encouraged you, help us spread these stories of faith by sharing the podcast, subscribing, and following us on social media. And if you feel led to support our mission, your donations help us continue bringing hope and inspiration to others. So until next time, guys, keep stepping forward. Bye, y'all.